My sister and her fiancé left me off the guest list, not realizing I had paid for the whole wedding. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw the invitation. My name wasn't on it. Not even a +1 or a vague acknowledgement that I existed in their lives. I stared at that tiny card for what felt like forever, my chest tightening, my hands trembling. I had spent months quietly making sure every detail of Rachel's wedding was perfect. Every flower arrangement, every catered meal, every photographer session, I handled it all. Nearly $75,000 out of my own savings. All for a day that was supposed to celebrate my sister. And now I wasn't even considered worthy of attending. I thought about all the times I had put Rachel first. I had helped her pay for college, lent her money when her job fell through, and even covered some of her rent when she was short. I never asked for anything in return, never expected recognition. But this was different. This was a slap in the face. To realize that she and Ethan could go through life pretending I didn't exist, while benefiting from everything I had done in secret, was a pain I couldn't put into words. I felt a mix of anger and heartbreak that churned in my stomach. I had always tried to be the responsible older sister, the one who kept the family together. But now I felt invisible. I wondered if Rachel even remembered what I had done for her, or if she simply assumed it was her right to take without ever giving back. And Ethan? I had never liked him much. Charming on the surface, but entitled, selfish, and the kind of person who would step over anyone if it suited him. Seeing him standing proudly next to Rachel, knowing I had funded their dreams, and that they didn't care enough to even include me, it was unbearable. I spent the night sitting on my couch, staring at the invitation over and over, replaying every memory, every sacrifice, every late-night call I had made to make sure her wedding would be flawless. I felt like I had been invisible all along, like my contributions didn't matter. The anger simmered quietly, transforming into something heavier, determination. I wouldn't let this go. I wouldn't just stand by and watch them enjoy everything I had built for them while I was erased from the story. I realized I needed a plan, a way to show them that taking me for granted had consequences. But first, I allowed myself a moment to feel everything, the hurt, the betrayal, the humiliation. I had been kind, generous, and patient, and now it was clear that they had no intention of appreciating it. That realization hurt more than anything else. But I refused to let it break me. If they thought they could ignore me and get away with it, they were about to learn how wrong they were. I made a quiet promise to myself that night. I would get justice, not in public tantrums or loud arguments, but in a way that they would never forget. And deep down, I felt the first spark of something I hadn't allowed myself to feel before: revenge. It was going to be calculated, and it was going to be satisfying. They might have thought they were untouchable, but I was about to prove them very wrong. I had always been the responsible older sister. While Rachel flitted through life, I handled the practical stuff, helping her with college loans, giving career advice, even guiding her through life decisions she wasn't ready to make on her own. She leaned on me for everything, and I never minded. I wanted her to succeed, to be happy, and I took pride in supporting her. When she started dating Ethan, I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt, thinking maybe he would be different. But it didn't take long to realize he was just like her. Charming when it suited him, but selfish and entitled underneath. Over the years, Rachel and Ethan quietly depended on me in ways that never came up in conversation. They asked for financial help without hesitation, expected me to cover things they couldn't afford, and never said thank you. I always said yes. I had my own life, my own struggles, but I wanted to be the sister who could fix things, the one who could hold the family together. I never asked for anything in return, never demanded recognition. Even in my personal life, I often felt like I was sidelined. I had dated a few men over the years, but my relationships often came second to family obligations. If I wanted to go out or travel, there was always a call from Rachel asking for a favor. I didn't complain. I told myself it was my choice, my responsibility, and that the bond one had with her was more important than my own desires. But looking back now, I realize I was invisible to them in ways I hadn't admitted to myself. Then came the wedding invitation. I thought at first it was a mistake when I opened the envelope. My name wasn't there. Not mine, not even a placeholder. My heart sank, and I felt a cold knot in my stomach. I called my closest friends in disbelief, asking if they had received theirs. They had, and every one of them had a space for me listed as a guest. I tried to brush it off, hoping maybe it was a printing error. But then questions started pouring in. Family members I hadn't spoken to in months began asking me why I wasn't attending. Friends reached out, shocked that I had been left out. I couldn't answer them. I had no words that didn't sound bitter or defensive, and yet the shame and humiliation burned anyway. Every question, every glance from someone who knew, reminded me that I was invisible in the people who should have valued me most. I sat in silence for hours, feeling the betrayal weigh heavily on me. I had always been the one supporting Rachel, covering her mistakes, celebrating her successes. And now, when it came to her most important day, I wasn't even worthy of an invitation. I felt unappreciated, cast aside, and replaced by everyone she deemed more important. The knot of hurt and anger in my chest tightened, and I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't just let this go. This wasn't just disappointment. It was betrayal, and I would make sure it didn't go unanswered. I couldn't stop thinking about the invitation, about how I had been completely left out despite everything I had done. I needed answers, so I decided to call the wedding planner, pretending to be someone confirming details for a family friend. My heart pounded as I listened to the planner listing every aspect of the wedding. Then it hit me. Every major expense, every big decision, every luxurious touch had been paid for by me. The venue, the catering, the photographer, the flowers, even Rachel's designer dress. Every single thing had been covered quietly by my savings that I sat back in disbelief, my mind racing. All those evenings I spent on calls with the florist, the decorator, and the catering company suddenly flashed before my eyes. I remembered staying up late to figure out how to fund the deposit for the venue, while keeping my own bills paid. I thought about the countless weekends I had sacrificed, driving across town to meet vendors, sorting through endless emails, double-checking budgets, and making sure every tiny detail would go smoothly. Every sacrifice I made, every dollar I spent, was for Rachel and Ethan, and now they were pretending I didn't exist. The realization hit me like a punch to the chest. Rachel had taken everything I had done and acted like it was her own. She had let me pay for her dreams, her big day, without a single word of acknowledgement, without even a thought of including me. I felt a wave of humiliation wash over me, the kind that makes you want to disappear from the world for a moment. And yet, beneath the embarrassment, fury burned hot in my chest. How could they be so ungrateful, so blind to everything I had done? How could they erase me completely while living off my efforts? I thought back over the past 5 years, the quiet ways I had helped Rachel. I had co-signed loans when her credit wasn't enough. I had covered emergency bills she couldn't pay and stepped in whenever Ethan's overspending left her scrambling. I had kept my mouth shut when friends and family wondered why Rachel always seemed to have everything she wanted without working for it. I had done it because I loved her, because I wanted her to be happy. And now, that love and effort were being treated like air, unseen, unappreciated, and completely dismissed. My hands shook, my chest tight, and a knot formed in my stomach. I felt like a fool, used and invisible all at once. The betrayal cut deeper than I had imagined it could. Rachel and Ethan had not only taken my money, but they had also taken my trust, my kindness, and my patience and treated it like it was nothing. Every memory of helping, every thought that I was doing the right thing, now felt like it had been turned against me. And yet, even in that anger and humiliation, a strange clarity came over me. I wasn't going to let this slide. I had been wronged, and I would make sure they realized exactly what they had done. They thought they could erase me, but they had underestimated me completely. And the truth, when revealed, would hit them harder than anything I could say in anger. I spent the next few days pacing my apartment, replaying every moment in my head. Part of me wanted to call Rachel immediately, demand answers, and let her feel the anger and hurt she had caused. But another part of me hesitated. Confrontation had never been my style. I wasn't the type to yell or create drama, especially with family. I had always been the calm, reasonable one, the one who fixed problems quietly. Now, though, the idea of sitting silently while she acted like I didn't exist felt unbearable. I talked to a few close friends about what had happened. They told me to let it go, to walk away, to avoid unnecessary conflict. "She's your sister, Meg. Don't let this destroy your relationship," one friend said. Another warned me about the risk of burning bridges in the family. I appreciated their advice, I really did, but I couldn't shake the feeling that walking away would only let Rachel and Ethan get away with something truly wrong. Every time I thought about ignoring it, a surge of frustration built up inside me. I felt invisible, taken for granted, and completely dismissed. I kept thinking about all the times I had put Rachel first. I had sacrificed so much, time, money, even parts of my own happiness, always believing family came first. But now, after everything I had done, they had erased me completely. Ethan had stood by and allowed it, letting Rachel take credit for everything without so much as a nod in my direction. The injustice of it all made my stomach churn. How could someone be so selfish? How could someone be so blind to the person who quietly held everything together for them? Late at night, I lay awake imagining how it would feel to finally reclaim my voice, to step out from the shadow of being the quiet helper, and demand the recognition I deserved. I didn't want revenge in the petty sense, but I wanted them to understand the weight of their betrayal. I wanted to make sure they realized that kindness and sacrifice are not weaknesses to be exploited. My mind raced through all the ways I could assert myself without stooping to anger or humiliation. By the end of the week, I made a decision. I would not stay silent. I would not allow them to erase me or treat me like I was unimportant. But I also knew I needed to be strategic. This wasn't about yelling or creating a scene. It was about reclaiming my power, showing them that I was capable of standing up for myself, and making them see the truth. I would confront Rachel, but on my terms. I would be calm, controlled, and deliberate. Every move I made would serve to restore the respect I deserved and expose the way they had taken advantage of me. For the first time in days, I felt a sense of clarity. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't invisible. I had the ability to set things right, to take back what was mine, not just financially, but emotionally and morally. And when the time came, Rachel and Ethan would understand that underestimating me had been their biggest mistake. I knew I couldn't confront Rachel and Ethan without a plan. I needed to be smart, careful, and deliberate. I started by gathering every piece of proof I had: bank statements, receipts, contracts, emails with vendors. Every payment I had made, every deposit I had covered, I wrote down in detail. It was tedious work, but it gave me a sense of control. I could see clearly just how much I had done for them and how much they had taken without acknowledgement. While organizing everything, I started thinking about small ways to remind them, without being obvious, that I had been behind every major part of the wedding. I made a list of anonymous gestures I could drop, little things that would make Rachel and Ethan nervous or uncomfortable without them knowing I was responsible. Maybe a note from a vendor mentioning how everything had been funded, or a reminder to a family member about the generosity behind certain wedding touches. Nothing illegal, nothing aggressive, just subtle nudges that would make them feel the truth creeping in. I also planned how to highlight their mistakes and oversights. I would let certain details go forgotten, making it clear that someone else had taken care of them. Maybe the photographer would accidentally mention that payments had been prearranged, or the caterer could casually say how much thought went into organizing the menu. Each small reminder would add to the realization in their minds that they hadn't done it themselves, that they hadn't earned it, and that someone else's efforts had made their perfect wedding possible. I thought a lot about timing. I didn't want this to happen too early, when the situation could be dismissed, or too late, when the wedding was already over. The goal wasn't to humiliate them publicly, though that might happen naturally. It was to give them a moment of reflection, to make them understand what they had taken for granted. I wanted them to feel the weight of their choices without me having to yell or create drama. Emotionally, I felt a sense of satisfaction just from planning it. I wasn't driven by cruelty. I was driven by justice, by balance. Every note, every subtle reminder, every hint I planted was part of reclaiming my power. I would show them that kindness and trust are not weaknesses, that exploitation has consequences, and that being overlooked has its price. By the end of the week, I had my plan. It was methodical, careful, and completely within my control. I wasn't acting out of impulse. I was acting out of purpose. I knew the day would come when Rachel and Ethan would have to face the truth of what I had done for them, and when that moment arrived, they wouldn't be able to ignore it. I felt ready, calm, and quietly confident that my strategy would give me the satisfaction of finally being recognized and finally being seen. I began putting my plan into action slowly, making sure no one could trace anything back to me. The first step was creating small delays with the vendors. Nothing dramatic, just gentle pushes that would make things feel slightly off. I emailed the florist asking for a confirmation on an already paid invoice, which made them reach out to Rachel for reassurance. I called the catering company pretending to clarify the guest count, making them double-check details with her again. Each tiny inconvenience added just enough confusion to make Rachel feel like something wasn't fully under control. Then I added small reminders of the truth. The photographer casually mentioned in an email thread that the person who covered the package had great taste. When the decorator called to confirm the design elements, they accidentally referred to a discussion with the original payer. These weren't accidents, they were nudges, placed carefully so that Rachel and Ethan had no choice but to wonder who had done what. The best part was that everything still looked polite, normal, and harmless on the surface, that I began noticing changes quickly. Rachel started sending me short, tense messages, asking if I had spoken to any vendors, or if I knew why things felt disorganized. I kept my replies simple and innocent, telling her I had no idea and that I hoped everything was okay. Her stress was evident even through text, and a small part of me felt sorry for her. But then I remembered how easily she had erased me. Ethan wasn't handling it well either. According to a mutual cousin, he had been asking Rachel if they accidentally missed a payment somewhere, or if they were overspending without realizing it. The cracks were starting to show in their perfect picture. Their calm, confident attitude began to fade as they scrambled to understand what was happening. It wasn't chaos, just pressure, just enough to make them uneasy. Meanwhile, I made sure to remain completely calm. At family gatherings leading up to the wedding, I smiled, listened, and acted like everything was normal. I asked Rachel how the planning was going, and she always hesitated before answering, suspicion flickering in her eyes. But I didn't reveal anything. I stayed composed, supportive, and polite. No one in the family had any idea that I was the quiet force behind the tension building in the background, that I wasn't doing anything illegal or cruel. I wasn't ruining her wedding. I was simply adjusting the lens so she could finally see what she had chosen to ignore. Every small inconvenience reminded her that someone else had built the foundation of her big day. Every moment of panic was a reflection of how ungrateful she had been. Watching it unfold didn't make me feel guilty. It made me feel seen. It made me feel like the power she had taken from me was slowly returning. And they still had no idea what was coming next. The day before the wedding, I found a quiet moment to talk to Rachel alone. The living room was empty, soft music playing in the background, and for a few minutes, it felt like just the two of us existed. I invited her to sit, keeping my tone calm and steady. I didn't yell or accuse. I knew that wouldn't have the same impact. Instead, I spoke clearly and firmly. "Rachel," I began, "there's something you need to understand about this wedding." I paused to make sure she was listening. Her eyes flickered with curiosity, maybe a little apprehension. I explained, without hesitation, the truth about every contribution I had made. I told her how I had quietly funded the venue, the catering, the photographer, and even her dress. I described how I had handled the planning behind the scenes, making sure everything was perfect, while she remained unaware, or maybe just indifferent. At first, she stared at me in disbelief. I could see her mind racing, trying to process the facts. Her lips parted slightly, and she swallowed hard, clearly embarrassed. I didn't realize," she began, but her voice faltered. I let her sit with that. I didn't interrupt, didn't apologize for speaking the truth. I let the weight of my words sink in. I reminded her, gently but pointedly, of other times she had taken me for granted. I brought up smaller betrayals, moments when she had leaned on me financially, emotionally, or practically without acknowledging it. Every example was calm, matter of fact, leaving her with no room to argue or deflect. Each memory hung between us, creating a quiet tension that spoke louder than any shouting could. She shifted uncomfortably, her confidence faltering. It was satisfying, not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I wanted her to see clearly what she had overlooked. I had been the one making sure her life ran smoothly, and she had acted as if I didn't exist. Now, in this private moment, she couldn't ignore it. She was forced to confront the truth in a way that was inescapable. I didn't linger on anger. I kept my composure, showing her that I was in control. "I'm not here to ruin your wedding," I said. "I'm here to make sure you understand the effort and care that went into it, and the cost of ignoring those who support you." Her eyes filled with realization, and I could see a mix of shame and regret slowly replacing the shock. For me, this was a moral victory. I hadn't needed to shout, manipulate, or humiliate her publicly. I had simply told the truth, calmly and clearly, forcing her to face her own choices. The embarrassment on her face was real, unforced, and deserved. In that quiet confrontation, I reclaimed a part of myself I had thought lost. The recognition I deserved, not just for the wedding, but for years of patience, sacrifice, and unacknowledged support. When I finally left the room, I felt a strange mix of relief and quiet satisfaction. Rachel would remember this moment, just as I would. And for the first time, I didn't feel invisible. The wedding day arrived, and everything looked perfect on the surface. Guests were arriving, music was playing, and Rachel was glowing in her dress, oblivious to the subtle shifts about to unfold. I stayed calm, blending in with the crowd, keeping a friendly smile on my face while quietly making sure my plan was in place. Earlier that morning, I had given the wedding planner a complete, detailed invoice of every contribution I had made. I didn't announce it, didn't ask for recognition, but the planner knew exactly how to weave that information into the day subtly. Nothing obvious, just hints, small acknowledgments that would eventually reach the ears of family and friends. During the speeches, everything unfolded exactly as I had hoped. The caterer mentioned how thoughtful the planning had been, adding casually, "It's clear someone cared a lot about making this day special." The florist remarked on how organized the setup had been, and the photographer smiled when he said, "It's amazing how smoothly everything came together. Somebody really went all out to make sure the day was perfect." Each comment was natural, innocent, and yet carefully placed. People began whispering, looking around, trying to figure out who had gone above and beyond. Rachel's smile began to falter slightly. She caught a few of the comments and glanced at Ethan, confusion and anxiety written across her face. Ethan tried to laugh it off, but I could see the unease growing. They both started realizing that the perfect wedding they had taken for granted wasn't entirely their doing. The subtle acknowledgement of my role began to reach the ears of close family members, who exchanged knowing looks and whispered quietly among themselves. Guests started putting the pieces together. "Wait, didn't Megan handle most of this?" one aunt murmured. A cousin nodded, recalling my late-night calls and secret trips to vendors. By the time Rachel and Ethan noticed, the realization had begun to sink in. They had relied on me entirely, and everyone else could see it too. The feeling of powerlessness on their faces was satisfying. Rachel's cheeks flushed with embarrassment, and Ethan's confident posture faltered. No one needed to point fingers, no one needed to make a scene. The truth was evident. Their attempts to appear in control had failed, and they couldn't hide the fact that they had depended on someone else's hard work while pretending it was all theirs. Through it all, I maintained my calm, polite demeanor. I smiled, congratulated Rachel when appropriate, and acted as if nothing was happening. But inwardly, I felt a quiet victory. The subtle hints, the carefully placed reminders, had worked exactly as I planned. Rachel and Ethan were facing the consequences of their disregard and arrogance, not through dramatic confrontation, but through the simple exposure of truth. By the end of the day, everyone knew, at least quietly, who had made the wedding possible. And Rachel and Ethan? They were left with the uncomfortable awareness that they could no longer take me, or my contributions, for granted. The humiliation was theirs, earned without a single raised voice or public argument. After the wedding, I took a step back and let Rachel and Ethan face the consequences of their actions. I didn't need to say anything further. The small hints and subtle exposure of my contributions had already done their work. Family and friends were quietly aware of the truth, and Rachel's attempts to maintain control of the narrative were failing. I watched from a distance, calm and collected, while they tried to navigate the embarrassment and guilt that now lingered over them. In the days following, I felt a noticeable shift in my relationships with supportive family members. Relatives who had previously assumed Rachel handled everything began reaching out to me, acknowledging my efforts and expressing gratitude for everything I had done. Cousins, aunts, and even my parents started to see me in a new light, not just as the responsible older sister who always helped, but as someone who had quietly held the family together. Their support felt reassuring and genuine, a reminder that the love and effort I had poured into our family had not gone unnoticed by everyone. Emotionally, I had time to process what had happened. The pain of being excluded and betrayed still lingered, but it no longer weighed me down in the same way. I felt vindicated, a sense of calm satisfaction replacing the anger I had carried for weeks. I realized that I had taken control of a situation where I had been powerless, transforming betrayal into a moment of personal strength. The liberation I felt was deep. I was no longer the sister who quietly sacrificed everything without recognition. I had reclaimed my power and my dignity, and that was something no one could take from me. There was also a financial aspect to consider. I had kept detailed records of every payment and contribution I had made for the wedding. After careful thought, I approached Rachel calmly, explaining the total amount and requesting repayment. I didn't yell or demand. I presented the facts clearly and confidently, making it impossible for her to argue without looking dishonest. She hesitated, then reluctantly agreed. It wasn't about the money as much as it was about recognition and fairness, but having her acknowledge the debt quietly added another layer to the justice I had created. With the repayment in motion and family members recognizing my efforts, I felt a profound sense of closure. The betrayal that had once cut so deeply now felt like a lesson learned rather than a wound that would fester. I had shown Rachel and Ethan that kindness and generosity are not to be exploited, and that actions have consequences. By the end of it all, I stood taller, more confident, and emotionally free. I no longer carried the weight of unacknowledged sacrifice. I had turned a painful betrayal into a triumph of strategy, patience, and moral clarity. The wedding had gone off beautifully, but more importantly, I had reclaimed my respect, my voice, and my self-worth. It was a victory in every sense that mattered, one I could carry with me long after the last guest had left. After everything settled, I finally turned my focus to myself. For years, I had been consumed by family obligations, helping Rachel, supporting Ethan, and keeping the household running smoothly. Now, I could invest my energy in my own life. I started taking steps I had delayed for too long, advancing my career, setting aside savings for future plans, and exploring opportunities one had ignored while prioritizing others. For the first time in years, I felt the freedom to make choices solely for myself, without guilt or second-guessing. That I also noticed how Rachel and Ethan were dealing with the aftermath of their actions. The whispers and glances from family and friends hadn't faded. They faced long-term consequences that weren't immediate, but steadily became clear. People began questioning their judgment, their entitlement, and the way they had relied on me to create a life and celebration they could never have managed alone. The embarrassment lingered, and I saw them struggle quietly with the realization that their greed and disregard for others had lasting effects. Meanwhile, I felt a quiet pride in what I had accomplished. I hadn't just reclaimed money I had spent or exposed the truth. I had reclaimed my voice, my dignity, and the respect I had earned over years of effort. I no longer felt like the invisible sister who quietly sacrificed for everyone else. My actions had shown that strategic, calm, and thoughtful steps could restore balance without unnecessary drama or aggression. Investing in myself also brought a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in a long time. I pursued professional opportunities one had once set aside, traveled when I wanted, and allowed myself to dream again without feeling obligated to serve someone else's needs first. It wasn't just about moving on, it was about creating a life where I was valued and where my contributions mattered because I chose to make them, not because someone demanded them. I realized that winning wasn't just about the financial repayment or the subtle exposure of Rachel and Ethan's dependence. It was about reclaiming my self-respect. I had shown that being taken for granted didn't have to define my worth, and that thoughtful, strategic action could create justice without destroying relationships unnecessarily. The moral of the story became clear. Loyalty is important, but blind loyalty that allows others to exploit your kindness is never worth it. Protecting yourself, standing up calmly, and asserting your value matters far more. Looking back, I felt a sense of closure that went deeper than I expected. Rachel and Ethan's mistakes served as a lesson, but my growth, confidence, and independence were the real victory. I didn't just survive the betrayal, I thrived beyond it. I had shown that careful planning, self-respect, and courage could turn betrayal into empowerment. In the end, I walked away with more than money. I walked away with my dignity restored, my strength proven, and the knowledge that I was in control of my own life.